In this video, I'm going to talk to you about how to render a perspective. Now, your rendering is at this point probably a single line drawing, and you can certainly use that. What I actually have done though is I have traced over mine. You can see I've overlaid a piece of vellum and I've traced over mine in pencil. And the reason is because as I apply marker, the marker is going to mix with whatever the lines are being created with. So I'm working in pencil now because if I mix my marker in here, it's not going to be as dark as it is if I was mixing it up against a Sharpie line, for example. Now, the other thing I want to talk to when you look at this is everybody's style of rendering deviates right at this point. Now, a person who's a very experienced sketcher or drawer or renderer, whichever word you want to use, needs very few lines to trace and render. I don't need very many. And in fact, the less lines I have, the better, because my natural state is sketching very loosely. However, when I was first starting to draw and do renderings as a student, I used my ruler and my T-square and my triangles to draw every single line at this point so that everything was straight. Because I was nervous about drawing a crooked line or drawing an incorrect line. And so, this version of, or this state of the drawing that it's in right now, if you would have seen my drawing many years ago when I was beginning, every line would be drawn with a T-square triangle. But because I have a little bit more experience, I'm okay with some of the loose lines. But notice there are a few lines still on here that I did not sketch. And that's because it doesn't matter how great of an illustrator or renderer one is, you still have to, at least for me, I still have to pull back on my sloppiness a little bit because I start to get real loose and have fun and I'm scribbly, and it results in a nice rendering that's a very loose style. But for a beginning student, it can really read, instead of being loose and controlled, it can read as being very messy. And so we're trying to avoid that. And so one of the things that I do, even now in my more experienced state, that I do before I start rendering with markers to really kind of pull back and check my sloppiness a little bit, is I still use my ruler for critical lines. And let me show you. I've used a straight edge to create all of the vertical lines that indicate walls. You can see here. I would also start to do verticals for this arch and also a vertical here for this exterior wall. You can see over here I've got some straight verticals, and you can see on my window I've got verticals all drawn with a ruler. You can also see I have used a horizontal. I've used my T-square to come in and bring some guidelines here. So you can see I've got horizontal lines here that ends the top of that wall treatment that we've added in SketchUp that's going to be shown in here as well. I've got the guidelines here. I've got straight horizontal lines indicating this console table, the outer frame, the outline of this table. So it's really just critical. You can see more here too. You can see I'm using the horizontal lines to make sure that my lampshades are the same height because they're both set at the same plane. So keep in mind, bring in vertical and horizontal lines and lines to the vanishing point for critical things to keep your drawing from looking kind of crooked or too sloppy. Now, as far as applying the color goes, you're experienced enough now to know that you have to apply the color to all of these elements here using a mix of your stippling, cross-hatching, and scumbling technique. You can use variations of color to blend values from dark to light, or you can also add pen on top to indicate some texture. You can also bring in some highlights and shadows as well. But just keep in mind, what we want to avoid is black outlines of objects. with flat color applies so that it looks like a coloring book. So bring in shade, shadow, contour lines, any sort of layering of color to bring some realism here. And then of course, as I said here, make sure that you have some straight guidelines, even if you're going to sketch from this point forward. Another thing that I want to bring your attention to is elements that are responding to the vanishing point. It's really important that you remember scale. So for example, my wood planks here are 6 inches wide. And so you're not going to see very many of them because it's being covered by the rug. But I went to my true height wall all the way back here. And you see how you can see my foot wide lines that were on my grid a long time ago. And you can see I put a dot in the middle, splitting that 12-inch box in half. And I have extended now my line out, and so that's giving me the width of the planks. And so I'm going to do that all the way across here because that's an indication of scale. And then of course we do horizontal lines to indicate the planks at random dimensions back here. Okay, so just remember that's really important. Anything that is an indication of scale. If I were to have, for example, a tile along this wall, I would use the vanishing point and extend those pieces out and still use my grid to indicate scale. The other thing that is just a good piece of advice to give anyone who's at this stage of a drawing is you might consider bringing in some kind of advanced precautions or some guardrails for your drawing in case things go awry. And so what you can see here is I have my original drawing with all my layers on top, and I have an 11 by 17 piece of vellum on top of this. Now you can also use your 18 by 24 if you want to, but sometimes you can take a drawing like this and bring it to a copy place, and they will put your 11 by 17 vellum in the copier. And if they will do that for you, then it's a really great idea to take this original that you've created and take it to the copy place and bring in 5 or 6 sheets of vellum and have them photocopy the line drawing on the vellum. It won't wipe out when you use your marker, but the lines will be light enough that it shouldn't distract the viewer once you've applied the color to it. And once you have that, then it's nice to do a full rendering just as practice, and then go ahead and do a final rendering. Now keep in mind, your tendency, if you do that, is going to be the second you mess up to grab another piece of vellum and stick it on top. And what's going to happen is you'll blow through your copies really fast. So finish the entire process of rendering, and then if you want to do a second one to kind of edit and finalize and apply all the lessons you learned on the first one, then bring your other sheet on. But bringing in those copies can kind of help reduce the nervousness. The other thing is to just really relax and have fun and have a good time and start to explore your own rendering style, because this is a very time-consuming process, and so the more that you can just relax and enjoy it, the more fun it will be.